Welcome to another Dragonlance Saga creator episode. My name is Adam, and today I'm talking with the talented individuals behind, well, some of the talented individuals behind the Dragonlance Companion, available now on DM's Guild. And there's, of course, a link in the description below before we get into the conversation proper. I just want to say thank you to the members of this channel and invite you, those of you who are not yet members, to perhaps consider it. There's also a link below as well for that. So thank you both so much for joining me. Jimmy and Matt, they are from Splinterverse Media. And again, Dragonlance Companion, they're right in the middle that you're looking at is the product, the most recent product that they've released. How are you both doing today?
Great. Thanks for having us.
I'm very happy to have you here to talk about this. It should be clear that I'm a Dragonlance nerd, and so it's nice to meet other people who share a passion in some level with mine and the audience, of course. And so for those of you who are watching this live, if you have any questions, comments, thoughts about this product or Splinterverse Media's other projects, please put them up in the chat. And when we have an opportunity, we'll try to bounce off of those as the conversation, sort of follows its natural course. What I'd like to do before we dive into this, John, thanks so much for joining live. Yes, this is, I don't know how you guys refer to it. Maybe, Jimmy, let me ask you, is this an official release? How does that work?
Yeah, so there's an interesting distinction. You have sort of homebrew things that people make, you have fan content that people make. We like to call this a third-party publication because it is done by professionals, but it has the official permission of Wizards of the Coast through the DM's Guild agreements to use the setting. So it's kind of this hybrid, but definitely a professional piece.
And I think a lot of the times when you're looking at these types of products, actually seeing samples of it rests any sort of concerns that one may have about whether or not it's professional or not. Because this looks like a straight up professional piece, not something that, someone put together with a Word doc and, just released it as a PDF.
Yeah, there's a big misconception around third-party publications. I mean, when you think there is a long history of amazing third-party publications. I mean, the first 5th edition books were done by Cobalt Press. Talking about Dragonlance, you had Sovereign Press that was started by Margaret Weiss. All of those are third-party publications.
Yep.
And we're just kind of trying to continue in a tradition of high quality third party supplements.
That's great. Well, you're not new to the scene. You've been producing content and releasing it on DM's Guild for a little bit. What made you get into this this industry to begin with?
Yeah, so for me, I was in the middle of the pandemic and I was sort of isolated and thinking, what interest can I explore while I'm trapped in my house, right? And so almost 2 years ago now, I just started thinking, well, I love D&D and I have this past experience in real world publishing and marketing and things like that. And what can I do with those two things? Can I put them together? And I started seeing some of the things that were happening on DM's Guild and Drive Through RPG and some of these marketplaces. And I thought, oh, well, I could do that. I've got these skills. And so I just started doing that. And I found Matt quickly in that process, and we teamed up to work on now 7 books.
Wow.
And the goal is to really just differentiate ourselves in the marketplace with our pillars, including quality, balance, creativity, and inclusivity in our products. And so so far it's been just a lot of fun, and we're just very blessed to be successful with this.
Hey, that's great. So you had mentioned that you had 7 previous publications. Is this the first time you're dipping your toe in Dragonlance?
Well, we kind of went there with our Fizban's Vault of Draconic Secrets. So, Fizban is a big part of that, and even the Wizards book, the Fizban's Treasure of Dragons, kind of dipped into that a little bit. So, we definitely went there, and part of that is because Matt is such a huge fan of Fizban that some of the ideas for that book came from Matt.
That's great.
Yeah, I started reading Dragonlance when I was a wee tot. Before I even really had started getting into TTRPGs. I just saw it as a fantasy series, and then discovered later on, oh, this isn't just a fantasy series. This is an entire setting where I can create my own adventures.
Mhm.
And I connected very early on with Fizban as a character, and just kind of continued from there. I would say, if I'm being 100% honest, it is either my favorite or second favorite setting,
Oh, wow.
and it flips depending on the day when you talk to me, whether it's Dragonlance or Planescape, but it's always one of those two.
Nice. Yeah, I just finished reading the Slaying the Dragon or something book about the secret history of TSR, and the author was really adamant about clarifying that Planescape was the best campaign setting ever released by TSR, full stop. That, of course, didn't sell very well because it was the end of TSR's life cycle. But like, it's one of those campaigns where I had friends that were into it, that were trying to draw me into it, but I was like, I'm a diehard Dragonlance guy. I don't really want to go anywhere else. Like, just let me live here for a bit, and you guys can continue your adventures elsewhere. So
Yeah.
I can understand that for sure.
And that's a thing that is important to say, is that we're uh, here to help people tell the best stories that they
Mhm.
want to tell at the table, regardless of the setting. That's always been part of what Splinterverse does. But if we're putting out a Dragonlance book, we want to be able to facilitate the best games in the Dragonlance setting
Yeah.
that, anyone can have at their table.
So there's a lot that you all offer in this Dragonlance Companion. It sort of seems to work pretty harmoniously with what WotC has already released with Shadow of the Dragon Queen. Nothing really is like dramatic that I noticed as far as like reshifting rules or refocusing on how specific classes work or anything like that. What type of lead time do you need to start having in order to create a publication that's going to be available on DM's Guild as soon as it is approved to be available? Like, how long have you been working on this?
So this one over 6 months, and to answer your question, we want as much lead time as possible. So if Wizards is listening and you want to give us the heads up, we're here to take it.
Yeah.
But yeah, we started officially the day after the announcement. We put out our open call for pitches, but we had been working on it. We knew this was probably coming, so we had some things that Matt and I were working on in advance of this. So we had even a little bit more lead time before that. But we also, when they make those announcements, we look at what they're doing and we say, how can we complement what they're doing? We don't want to just compete with them. If they had released a box set like they did with Spelljammer, we probably wouldn't have done a companion book because it would have been competing in so many ways with what they were doing. But because they chose to do an adventure, we thought, okay, there's a lot of opportunity for us to do our companion style book, because this is our second sort of companion style book, and really help people feel like with those two books, you get that complete picture. You're getting lots more player options because, as we've seen, Wizards is kind of doing one subclass, in a book, or a couple subclasses. They're not doing all of them. And then some people that main certain classes are feeling left out, right? So we're trying to think strategically and say, how can we just dovetail with these releases and really make you feel like, hey, if I just get these two, I'm good. I can get more stuff. But if I have these two, I have a solid foundation.
Right. I mean, you have a lot of people contributing to this. I mean, you have some really great artists, you got some great writers, game designers. I mean, at what point, like, do you just have like this sort of envelope full of names that you can reference, or do you like outsource and just like reach out to people, or like how do you get the submissions in order to create this single volume?
Yeah, so as we've done 7 now, we have built up a repertoire of people that we do go back to based on, past performance and talent. But we like to do open calls occasionally. This was one of the books where we did open calls. Then we give that a period. We take in all the submissions, and then Matt and I review them, and we really make those selections. And so there was quite a few new people we hadn't worked with before on this book. And so you just kind of iterate and you get to work with some people. Again, it also depends on the project. Some people are really talented at maybe just doing subclasses or maybe just doing adventures. And so even if you go back to them in the future for something else, they may say, I just want to stick to adventures, right? So you really do need a big circle of contacts to pull something like this off.
Right. So I always kind of struggle with the idea of anytime you undertake a project, my background's in advertising, understanding the brand that you're working on is paramount. You have to understand the tone, the voice, the just the general vibe of what it is you're producing for. So, what were some of those cues for you when you were either receiving submissions for work and while you were sort of working on editing and putting the book together in its form? How were you trying to maintain that essence of Dragonlance? And I have to be very fair here. Everyone sees Dragonlance differently. Everyone has a different vibe of Dragonlance depending on when you started getting involved in it and just your overall experience. And every single version of that is acceptable. I'm just curious what yours was when you got into it and how you sort of maintained that vision.
Yeah, so part of that was Matt's job because I am someone who likes all the settings, and so I've never gone super deep in any of the settings. I've gone enough to know the setting and to like the setting, and I definitely crash coursed a lot of your videos while I was working on this book so that I could deepen my knowledge. But I recognize that I'm not, as deep of a Dragonlance fan as other people, and so Matt I knew was, and so I leaned on them a lot for that. But what I find in terms of design is, and this has happened with other settings that we've worked with, is that it's great to have a mix of people with varying levels of deepness in terms of their connection to the setting. Because what ends up happening is you get somebody like Matt who has tons of experience and can give you these deep cuts of references to things in Dragonlance and help you stay on track of, oh, that's going overboard, that's against canon, things like that. But then you get these new people that have just a light connection to Dragonlance that maybe think outside the box. And when you combine all that together, because we do have 19 designers working on this, you get such a great mix because ultimately we want all of the books to have a mixture of the expected and the unexpected. And so that combination to me has proven out to lead to that in our past works and this one I think as well. But I think Matt could probably best answer kind of how, the feeling that we were trying to keep in terms of the canon and the lore and all of that.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, the biggest thing that I did whenever I knew that Dragonlance was going to be a thing, which to harken back to your previous question of when it started kerneling in my mind, it was when the UA came out that had
Yeah.
Dragonlance races in it. That was kind of like my go button, so to speak. So I went back and I read the original trilogy, and I didn't have time to go back as far as I wanted and to read like all of the in between novels.
Right.
But I went back, read the original trilogy, and I said, okay, this is my North Star. When I am looking at all of these submissions and when I'm looking at material in the process of editing it and making it into its best form, because that's what an editor is at the very base. You're taking the words that the writers give you and make them as good as you can.
Yeah.
And my North Star in that process was, would this fit thematically with the original set? Like one of the things that we did was we did the herald items. And the herald items used the piety system from Theros. Obviously, that's not something that is directly connected with Dragonlance, but thematically it fit whenever we were looking at, oh, these are items that are created by the connections to the gods. Like all of these things fit together and would be welcome, I feel like, at in a Dragonlance campaign.
Yeah.
And that was really the process, was trying to figure out what would best fit into the campaign setting when you're, running at the table.
I have to say the Piety system that you all developed, it was one of the sort of gold stars that I sort of put in my notes. I was really impressed with that. I mean, one of the standout features of 5th edition for me personally is the faction system. And I know that's taken from probably Planescape, to be quite honest, after we already mentioned it. But I like that it's an inclusion in 5th edition, though I've never seen anyone actually use it before. Some other people put it in their source book. But seeing the Piety system and knowing that it is very similar in spirit to the faction system, it immediately connected with me. And I personally, I'm a big role-playing fan. The game mechanics are less important than actually the storytelling aspect for me as a dungeon master, and even as a player when I get the opportunity. So when I see something like a Piety system that leans heavily on the connection between an individual character and their deity, and knowing that the growth of that connection can then spur rewards, and then you actually get to see results from actually role-playing your character correctly, I mean, that's as good as it gets for a role player, in my opinion.
I
And so,
mean, and that's 100% what the goal is. I am very much a numbers person,
mhm.
but I am a role player at heart. And I think that role playing games, TTRPGs, are at their best when the mechanics enhance the story. And I think that we were able to bring the Piety system in a way where the mechanics were making, they were a harmony
Mhm.
to the role playing. They weren't working against it, they were helping it. And I think that's the top for me.
Yeah.
And even though we have the herald items, the Piety mechanics are all there. So if you want to have it result in some other reward or some other punishment, you've got all the things you need there to make that happen. So it was really exciting to put that together.
Yeah. I always sort of bounce between two schools of thought when it comes to introducing new rules. Is I don't want it too overdeveloped, because then there's no real room for wiggling as a dungeon master and to sort of extrapolate it to different forms. On the other hand, I want it developed enough so I really understand the basic core of what it's supposed to mean. And I think you guys did a really wonderful job of walking that tightrope with the Piety system. I have a criticism. I was a little upset you didn't extrapolate that same thing out to the Order of High Sorcery or the different Knights orders that you featured in this, and instead went the feat direction. I'm going to put a pin in that, because I'm actually more curious at this moment about, upon receiving work from developers, do you guys game test their work, or how do you go through the selection process of saying this is good enough, this isn't quite there yet? Like, how do you balance that?
It's a long process. I think a lot of a lot of the designers that work with us for the first time, it can be very intimidating and intense. But what my overall philosophy is that I want people to read the book and want to buy another Splinterverse book.
Mhm.
So it's super critical to me that everything is balanced, that it's not a pain in the neck for the DM. I don't want them cursing us and throwing the book and saying no more Splinterverse stuff, right? So
Right.
there's a lot of stuff we do. Sometimes it's play testing, sometimes it's sharing it. We have a private Discord server where we're working on the book, so we put stuff out and all the designers can give information on some of the drafts after it's gone through. Us working directly with the designer, then it goes to the larger group of designers and they can weigh in. But Matt's been a DM for over 20 years, so that comes in handy as well. I mean, we've got a lot of different ways. When you have 19 designers, you have them looking at it, you have play testing in some cases, then you have the DM weighing in. I mean, we're coming at it from all angles, and we're just open to feedback. We're both pretty straightforward people. I mean, if the goal is to make it the best it can be, then we're here for it. And I approach editing like it's life or death. Every section to me, I want it to be somebody's favorite section.
Right.
And so I take it like it's going to be life or death if we don't get it right. And if you do that with every section of the book, then you're going to get messages like we get, which is, oh, I like this part or I like that part. And there's not really a consistent, everybody's favorite part is this one part. So,
Yeah.
so far, so good.
I mean, I gotta say, I've as a Dragonlance fan, you're always faced with the reality that depending on who's writing for it, and these are, from TSR to Wizards of the Coast and all the different game designers that have been involved in the process, there is always some sort of changing in like either the lore or specific characters or timelines or events. Even the geography has altered, over the course of over Dragonlance's development. And so trying to distill that down into one logical like presentation seems to be a near insurmountable task. What you all did with the not just the like the gods of Krynn section, I thought you did a brilliant job. Of course, introducing that piety system, but also the River of Time section that you added into this. I thought you did such a wonderful job with that. It's so easy to be confused about the concept of time travel in any given universe, fictional or real. I mean, it's just something that a lot of people don't really have the patience to try to wrap their head around. And the way that you approached it was true to Dragonlance, but clear enough to be understood by anyone who just wants to get a cursory idea of what the River of Time is and time travel means. If you are going to travel the River of Time, are you going to screw stuff up, in the process of it? And Dragonlance has very specific rules, and they're not always in the same place. And you all found them, you distilled them, and you presented them in a very easy to understand manner. For someone that's just a huge fan of this setting, I really appreciated that because you don't see it anywhere else.
Yeah, when that came in as a submission from Matt Daly, it was, a light bulb for us because we were fans of the old Chronomancer books and things like that, right? And so it just seemed like such a natural fit. And Matt is a really talented writer. And so when you read that section, it just rolls off the tongue. And we felt the same way, in the drafts about how it was easy to understand and consume. And we made some suggestions to just add a little bit more for uses outside of even Dragonlance, because we do want that benefit beyond the setting that we're working with. But Matt also contributed a lot of items so that you could act on this desire to time travel and spells that connect to time travel. So it was important to us to make sure we had not only the sort of advice and suggestions, but then some actual mechanics to implement it, like the Time Reaver spell. And we really worked hard to make sure that spell was balanced, did not drive a DM crazy, because you can get real OP with time travel, right?
Oh,
and
yeah.
so we really spent a lot of hands on that. Just saying, what are we going to do here to make sure this is not something where the DM throws our book across the room?
Going back to the gods, because I always like to go by the gods, you had specifically called out Chaos and the High God, and that was a development that didn't happen until War of Souls. And even then it was a little bit fuzzy, and they sort of reneged some little bits and pieces of it. I really like that you guys spent some time explaining, no, this is the cosmology, and it starts with these two sort of insane characters, and they sort of span out from there. It's easy to think as a sort of generic role player, but just a Dragonlance fan, that, well, you have your 7 gods in each of the different alignments, and that's kind of it. But really, there's a mommy and a daddy, and that mommy and daddy are in the form of like literal chaos. In one hand, Ionthus, as it's called, and then there's the High God. And there's no clear, real structure to either of them. We see a sort of avatar version in Summer of Chaos, but like, other than that, they're not really like spelled out at all. But you guys took some time and you put it together, and I really, just as a fan, appreciate that you included it with all of the other gods to give a nice, clear, concise presentation of the cosmology of Krynn, because it can get confusing and it can get muddled, but it's nice to see it all in one place.
Yeah, it's a bit scary because you don't know what Wizards of the Coast is thinking. Are they going to retcon something? Are they going to remove something? Right. And so we just had faith,
Yeah.
pun intended.
But
We
you
had
did,
faith.
yeah, but you did well. I mean, I gotta, tip my cap to you. What was your plan with this on release? Did you get to the page count you wanted with all of the different additions, added to the campaign? Were there some that you just couldn't get developed appropriately in time, or how did it land for you producing this?
It actually grew partly because we didn't start with the God section in there at all. It was not part of the original budget. It was not part of the original pitches. But one of my tasks as I'm going through this process is to just sort of check with my gut and say, what is this book missing? What do I feel like it really needs to take it to the next level? And as I was reading through the drafts that were coming in, I just kept seeing all these awesome references to the Pantheon. And I thought, we've got to do something with this. We've got to make sure that the players have something that they can refer to for the Pantheon, and then it evolved from there with the Piety and the herald items. So day one, that was not part of the plan, but it seems to be one of people's most beloved parts. So I'm glad I listened to my gut on that.
What about the other sections? I mean, are you comfortable where you landed, or did you wish that you had more in there? I mean, was there some that just had to hit the cutting room floor?
We're pretty good about not cutting stuff because I'm okay going over budget a little bit if it gets what we want done, what we want in the players' hands, what we want them to enjoy. And yeah, we didn't really have to cut anything. And we got everything we wanted. Certainly if we had Hasbro's money, we would have done multiple volumes and probably twice as big of a book, right? But yeah, for what we were trying to accomplish, yeah, we didn't have to cut much. And it would be just words or sentences that we cut, really. Yeah.
What about art submissions? I mean, was this something that you struggled to get, or do you just have, a handful of names that are just really solid producers for you?
There's some people I've been working with on a top secret project that was in the works before this. And so
Really?
I said, hey, what do you think about Dragonlance? And it turned out they were fans of it. So I was able to pull some of them in and then get some other new folks in the mix and yeah, just a variety, 25 different artists total. But yeah, it's one of those things where networking is everything in this business, and so just really trying to always be on the lookout for new artists. And so there were some first timers that we worked with in here, and then some people that we've worked with on a top secret project, as well as past books.
Yeah. The art in this is fantastic. The bits of maps that you have throughout the course of this are just great. I was really impressed with all of that. But this isn't just, here's some classes, here's some spells, here's some information about Dragonlance. You actually give a lot of adventure seeds and actually some straight up adventures in this. Um, do you feel like you're giving a little bit too much out there in the same volume? Did you ever think about splitting it up?
Yeah, we could. I just feel like there are so many books out there that are going to be just one thing. And what we want is this to be like a comprehensive supplement where you get a little bit of everything. And one of the reasons we have the appendix on the adventure hooks is that we want that player facing content to also be useful for the DMs. And so by giving those adventure hooks, you can turn that player facing content into NPCs or just even full blown adventures or encounters. But yeah, I mean, we could do it separately. It's just, we want to sort of have that Wizards model where our books have just so much in it that you have to have it. There's something in there for everybody.
All right, I want to come back to the pin that I had put in the Feats with the nightly orders. Now, this is just me being a grumpy old man, but why did you go that route rather than, the reputation route similar to what you did with Piety?
I think I can answer that one pretty easily with the fact that we saw what WotC was doing anyway. and the number one goal is for it to rhyme with what WotC creates.
Right.
So it was a choice that was made for us, and we just continued down the road as was previously paved.
Right.
I am not one that's going to sit here and tell different DMs, oh, you know, at your table, Takesis should be an aspect of Tiamat.
Right. Right.
I am there to provide the best that I can with the tools that I have. And that's been my like main focus, is to not directly contradict the mechanics that WotC will put out, but to also suggest, like, not to spoil anything, but the entire tier 1 adventure that we have in the book is about the Towers of High Sorcery. It's about accompanying a young mage.
Yeah.
Like that's there. And there is nothing stopping a DM that has care for those traditions to put in a requirement of, oh, you can say that you get this feat, but we have to have it be part of the role play that you're going through this process.
Right.
And having that latitude available to those DMs was really important.
Yeah, I think that's always the struggle, and it's something that I just see at the table on a regular basis, which is why I brought it up. You know, I've been role playing since like 40 years. It's been, it's nearly 40 years. I shouldn't be fair. I'm not that old. But like, it's rules as written in most groups, or it's straight up homebrew in other groups. But to sort of mix the two, it gets contentious when you have players coming in and out of different campaigns or different games. And the expectation that you can always fall back on is, of course, rules as written. And so when you do have a DM coming in and saying, look, I know this is what it says, but I want to roll it like this way, you can, and I have lost players because of that. And so, one, there has to be a nice repertoire between the dungeon master and the players. That's understandable in every single gaming group ever. And we've all had groups, presumably, where that hasn't been the best. But ultimately, you want to make sure that there's a base understanding. And so I always come from the position of, if you're going to put it in the book in a specific way, then for people to step outside of that is the exception. The rule is the literal rule in the book. I'm totally fine with stepping out of it. But when I saw that implemented in the UA, I was stunned, because instead of focusing on a journey for a character that, again, come from a role-playing background, coming from a role-playing perspective of, you need to earn the right to be this new thing. You have to go through this process, especially with mages of high sorcery, of course, wizards of high sorcery. You have to go through the test of high sorcery. That is a purely distilled role-playing experience, as you guys have included in this. When it's instead just presented as solely as a feat, then it becomes less special and less important to role-play, because the player has already done it. They're like, no, I just took the feat. I get to choose a feat. That's what I choose, and I've already done it. Why do I have to walk through it again? It's the presumption that once it's there, it's choosable and it's already done. And of course, you can always step outside of that. Of course, you can always customize that. But again, if it's presented one way, most people are going to take it that way. And so that's why I asked, because again, I thought it was the wrong decision, a rule decision from WotC. To see you guys continue that line, as a player, as a DM, kind of bothers me as well. But I do definitely understand your point of view. The perspective of the development of this book is that you're not trying to break down what WotC did and rebuild a new vision. You're trying to be a companion to what WotC did and to give options that they didn't. And from that perspective, I completely appreciate the decisions you made and the inclusions that you did. And it's really only a small little bit, like the feats, that sort of rubbed me a little bit oddly, as a choice.
Yeah. And to be frank, at my own table, uh, it's not how I would run it.
Mhm.
If I were going to take my players to Ansalon, to Krynn,
Mhm.
I would run it as they would have to go through the role playing process,
Yeah.
and then at the end we would do a level up into the level where they could select the feat.
Yeah.
That would be how I would do it at my table. But I definitely understand, not every table is mine.
Yeah.
So we just have to do what we
Yeah.
can to write the best we can for as many tables as possible.
Yep.
And it's a balancing act, because if you think about it, WotC put out 2, right? And then you have all these other backgrounds that are written a totally different way. And so
Yeah.
that's so few choices. So another reason we wanted to do this was to say at least we're doubling the choices if you do want to go that route. But you can use just part of it, all of it. You can manipulate it how you want to do it. As you said, that should be the exception. And we do need to be 5th edition throughout the book, but we're happy when people take just what they want and use it however they like, even if it's for OSR or some other edition even.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's always difficult because, first of all, we're all cagey role players. We love what we love and we shun what we don't love, generally speaking. And, in the internet age, I feel so old saying that. Social media is pervasive in everyone's lives, seemingly. You hear voices that normally are just sort of kept to themselves or to their friends and, their close-knit families. Now it's just broadcasted out to the greater world large saying, this can't stand, we must change, and, freaking out over the littlest things in most cases. So yeah, I'm one of those people that's sort of shouting at the heavens, shaking my fist, telling people to get off my lawn about it. But then, to be fair, I don't really play 5th edition that much at all. So I should not be the barrier that people, the ruler that people use to measure, what's good or bad. I like what you said there, Matt. You can't speak to everyone's table. Everyone's table is not like yours. And so you have to present options so people can use them as they see fit. But the options you provide are ones that I would not have considered initially in some of the cases. And I'm glad that you offered them because, again, if I didn't consider it, I couldn't have included it. You considered it, you included it, now I get to include it. And so that's
Yeah.
another aspect of it I like.
And the big secret is that not every piece of content is going to fit at every table.
Yeah.
There are things that have been published in the Splinterverse books that are not allowed at my table because they conflict with the way that I run my games, and that's fine.
Yeah.
The goal is to provide a good amount of content that can make the game better for people.
Mhm.
And whatever is going to do that, that's what should be put in the games.
Yeah. Well, I think you all did a great job of that, to be honest.
Thank you.
So you also included a bunch of beasts, a bunch of monsters, a bunch of creatures to run across, fight, or run away from, which I always liked. There's a particular image of a particular amphidragon that I feel like should be wearing a smoking jacket and maybe holding a pipe. It is the most adorable amphidragon I've ever seen. I don't know if it was intentionally trying to be like that, but what you have throughout this
It
book
has a
sort of,
sly smile.
yeah, it's amazing. It's like I want a pet amphidragon that looks exactly like that. What I love what you did about this is you broke up your sections with full page pieces of art. As an artist myself, I genuinely appreciate the amount of art that you have in this volume. It's not just text and numbers. You actually took care to have, some sort of visual representation of nearly everything that's in here. But that's also part of a point of contention that I have. Again, old man sitting on his porch saying, get off the lawn. You have a tiefling in here for one of the classes. I gotta ask, what was the choice there?
Do you want me to take this one, Jimmy?
Yeah, go ahead. We
Bat
both
it
we
right
both
back at
know
me.
the answer, but go ahead. Yes.
Yeah, of course. Because we had these conversations, and whenever I originally was looking at the art, because Jimmy will show me art as it comes in, my thought was, oh, that's spicy. That's going to be the spiciest thing that we may have in the entire book. Because tieflings only started existing in 4th edition. But I didn't say anything against it. And the reason that I didn't say anything against it was I knew WotC was going to do Spelljammer.
Mhm.
And Spelljammer allows a back door for, if DMs want to allow it,
Yep.
to have any race be in any setting.
Yeah.
Any setting that's connected to Spelljammer, I should specify.
Right.
So that was the reason why I didn't raise a red flag on it, because I knew people would talk about it.
Mhm.
I knew there might be some complaints about it too, but the big thing is, especially when we saw how Spelljammer came out, this is another point where we're rhyming with WotC.
Mhm.
And I think that there is an entire, I can't remember offhand, so please do correct me if I'm wrong on that, but the Shadow of the Dragon Queen has a section on races appearing in Krynn that aren't normally in Krynn.
Yeah, it talks about them maybe being from before the cataclysm, or that maybe they came through a portal or things like that. I mean, yes, it's kind of like a conversation starter to have this piece. I think it's really up to the DM. I mean, at the end of the day, you're not necessarily playing the art, right? You're playing the mechanics, you're playing
100%.
the character, right? So it was kind of like we just wanted to say, hey, maybe you'd have this, but also we feel it's important that when we create a book, that although we're giving you a lot of lore for that setting, we don't want you to feel restricted that you can't play these subclasses in a totally different setting.
Yeah.
There's nothing stopping you. Yeah, you might have to tweak it slightly, but when we did our Feywild companion, all of the lore for the subclasses had a little bit of Fey to it, right? But you could take it out of the Feywild and play it in some desert setting or some else, Greyhawk, wherever,
Yeah.
and you'd be fine. So it's another way of saying, hey, maybe this isn't just for Dragonlance.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I do also love the idea of, you had mentioned it early on about how you, as a company, put your books out, and you mentioned inclusive. And I think ultimately it comes down to what the players and the DM want to represent the game as, and having the option available just lets you know that, okay, it's there. Like if that's the direction you want to go, that's fine. And the piece of art is beautiful, and so you can't really complain about that. Personally, I would never allow them in my campaign, but then that's just my campaign, and that's it. I know a lot of Dragonlance fans, even different organizations that support Dragonlance, are include them in them as well. And there's also like an angelic version that I'm not familiar with yet, but that is also like that type of a character that they would also let in. So to each their own in those cases. Well, in every case in life, to each their own, as long as no one's hurt.
Well,
But
yeah.
yeah, I mean, just ultimately, whatever you're comfortable with. And that's really at the heart of what I was initially bringing up. How do you maintain the sense of Dragonlance when you're creating a product about Dragonlance? Because again, everyone has different sensibilities. Even though Dragonlance was never formally created as a campaign setting for 4th edition, I played it in 4th edition with 4th edition mechanics because I love this setting. So, it's not always going to be a 1-to-1 ratio of, well, the game mechanics work perfectly with how I happen to understand or like Dragonlance to operate. So then you have to homebrew stuff or just play a different edition. And so that's sort of my MO, answer to all
Yeah.
that.
I think if this was just an adventure book, it would be harder because we would have to make sure that every single part of it was willing to be used, that people were happy to use it. But because it's more of a supplement where you can pick and choose pieces to work for your table,
Yeah.
we tried to represent all the different ages of Krynn, not just the Age of Mortals and the War of the Lance and all of that. I mean, it's heavy on that, but there's a little bit of representation for all the different ages in here, because we don't know what age you're going to set your campaign in.
Yep.
And we didn't want to leave it out of the question for you to maybe set something during the Age of Dreams or whatever you want.
I love that
Yeah.
part of it too. I love the fact that, again, it goes back to that River of Time section. But like the fact that most people think about the Age of Despair, the War of the Lance, when they think about Dragonlance. I personally think, the Dragon Overlord portion of the Age of Mortals wasn't the best, but I didn't really mind it because it's Dragonlance. But after that, after War of Souls, I thought you could literally do anything you want here. You can have sorcerers, you can
Oh,
have
yeah.
warlocks, you can have tieflings, you can have anything. Because
Yeah.
that at that point in the era, it's very open. I thought that would be the best choice for WotC to go. But then also, going all the way back to the Age of Dreams, the Age of Might. I mean, there's some great ages of Krynn that are completely open to not just exploration, but also how you want to run them. It's
Oh, yeah.
like the Age of Dreams. You can literally do anything you want. It doesn't matter. Just have some fun with it. I mean, there's
I
some.
think.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh no, I was gonna say, I think if I were choosing a part that I would want to run with my group, it would probably be set right before the Cataclysm.
Oh yeah. That's
I
a
think
great
that
time.
because I love good villains, like good
Yeah.
aligned villains are my 100% cup of tea. So having that kind of dichotomy to play with, I
Yeah.
think would be excellent. So there's tons of stuff, and this is a toolbox.
Mhm.
That's what it comes down to. It's a toolbox that has a lot of tools that can make Dragonlance campaigns more memorable.
Yeah.
And that's what it's all about.
Is there a sort of a game mechanics, I don't know, like a sort of rule of thumb that y'all follow when it comes to, for example, the nightly orders of getting a feat and you go up to the next order, or you guys offer a class of fighter called the Fewmaster, where if you're sort of stepping back and looking at the structure of the dragon armies, a Fewmaster is a position given, not a class, so to speak. And so when you're presented with an option like the Fewmaster, it's similar to saying, okay, well, the class is going to be called a captain. I mean, it's a rank held. It's not really a class unto itself. How do you sort of balance that idea of, well, it isn't a character trope in Dragonlance. It's a rank, not necessarily a class. If I give it certain powers, or we present certain powers of that rank and it's now a class, does it still hold up to that spirit of what it was supposed to be representing in the first place? This is one of those that I sort of pulled out where I was sort of flabbergasted, because you should be, in my worldview, you should be able to be any class. I mean, Eric was a sorcerer, I mean, he's in charge of all of the dragon armies. Verminard was a cleric, and he was in charge of the Red Wing. So you could be literally any class and be presented as a Fewmaster or as a Dragon High Lord. Why choose that one specific one to say, no, this one's a class?
Well, I think we could have done a book of Fewmaster, all of them, right? And we just had to pick one where we could show it to the audience. I think if you think of this more of like the Fewmaster fighter, but you could certainly make a Fewmaster sorcerer or any of these, and maybe even use some of the lore tables that we include. It's just where it surfaced and it seemed to fit. But yeah, by no means we're not saying that you have to be a fighter to be a Fewmaster. It just was a way to weave it in, because you also have to think about, how do you talk about subclasses in the game? Are you openly saying, I'm a College of Ages bard? Is it words you actually use or not?
Right.
So there's just so many ways of relating to it. I mean, there's sort of the meta of talking about it, of I'm a fighter that's a Fewmaster, and all of these things. But then there's also, how do I speak about it in the game? So again, these are choices that the players and DMs have to make. But yes, I mean, I could see a Few Master be all these things and maybe repurpose some of the lore tables that we've included and then just have different mechanics for the features.
Yeah. Yeah, just when I was reading it, it struck me similar to the problems that I encountered as a dungeon master playing Star Wars Saga Edition with a character who chose to be a crime boss. As a player, you just choose to be a crime boss. You're like, well, how am I going to weave this into like a character story arc? And like, you just start out as a crime boss? That's
Yeah.
illogical, you know, like to start out as a, you know, someone of rank. It's like, well, you kind of got to earn it, don't you? And so that struck out in my head as like, huh, okay. And then of course you offer so many different examples of not just classes and, you know, world options in this, which I think are just stunning. Some of them don't really resonate, as I've already mentioned, with me personally, but I love that you did in fact include them because they may resonate with other people, and clearly they resonated with the game designers, and that is arguably one of the most important aspects of it, because creativity is not always from a vacuum. It's usually borrowed equity from someone else's aspect of creativity, and you're just sort of weaving it in a new, different way, especially when you're talking about an established IP like Dragonlance. So really, hats off to you guys. You all did a wonderful job putting this together, and it's showing in just the sales figures on DM's Guild. And I don't want to distill this down to business sense or anything like that, but you know, you nailed what the essence of Dragonlance needs to be in a 5th edition supplement, where WotC literally just gave us a little taste and then walked away. You sort of picked that ball up rather than trying to change the structure of the mechanics. You enhanced them and added to them in a very positive way, which I think, especially in, it seems sometimes like our culture as humans is sort of going in a negative way. It's nice to see it added in a positive way that actually opens doors rather than slams them shut. And I really do appreciate that as a player. So thank you guys for putting this out.
Oh, you're welcome. Our pleasure.
So where can people find you out there on the internet? Where can they connect with your other projects, or maybe with this one online?
Yeah, so we have Splinterverse.com, which has all the books and everything that we're up to, and I'm at Splinterverse everywhere. But Matt is also available on Twitch, so probably plug that.
Yeah. Where can they find you on Twitch?
I am everywhere at Synthetic 20 or Synthetic 20 TTV.
Okay.
And I do my own TTRPG projects as well.
Oh, cool.
Jimmy is a wonderful partner. But if you want to keep up with the stuff that I'm doing, Synthetic 20 TTV on Twitch and Twitter is the best place to find me.
Awesome. Well, thank you both again very much for your time and for coming on the show and talking about this project. I do think, again, genuinely, you know, just the candor of the back and forth of what I may not happen to like versus, you know, what you all included in this. It's still worth, you know, the money that, you know, to put down to pick this volume up, because even if there's one tiny little thing that you may not resonate with, there's tons of other stuff that you absolutely will resonate with it. So I do suggest that everyone watching this, give it a shot. Go take a look. See what options are available, because there's a lot of them, and they're probably going to just make your games better with what's presented. Thank you all again. That is going to do it for our conversation here about Dragonlance Companion. Thank you guys so much for tuning in live. I know we didn't bounce off of you guys very much, but it's nice to see that you're sort of chatting amongst each other and having a good time during the course of this conversation. Let us know in the chats or in the comments if you have checked this out already, or if you're going to. Ultimately, when it comes to Dragonlance, more is always better. Always better, because you can always pick and choose from any sources. So let us know what you think about all of this, and then go, you know, reach out to Splinterverse Media and let them know what you think. And, you know, if you have anything to submit, maybe you can actually submit it to them and see if they like it. It's always an option, right?
Absolutely.
Well, keep in mind, everyone, this channel is all about celebrating the wonderful world of the Dragonlance Saga. Thank you all so much for joining that celebration. Until next time, Slanjavar.